Thursday, everybody. We are wrapping up what is it now? Week 6 in COVID-19 stay-at-home land. And I hope everybody is doing well and doing the best that we can, right? Because now we're at the point where we're saying we're itching to have some normalcy back in our lives. Mike Koelzer, thank you so much for being here. I already have you on the screen, so I want to tell people who you are. Give a wave at least.
Who is that guy?
Who is this?
Hi, Michelle. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. We have known each other now for a couple of months before COVID took over our lives.
Yeah.
We were chatting on the podcast that you host, the Business of Pharmacy podcast, which is a great podcast and a great resource for pharmacists out there. And you also have owned your own pharmacy for decades. So tell everybody a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, we have I'm a third generation pharmacist. My grandpa and then my dad were in the pharmacy. So we're a family pharmacy, but it's always worked best with just having one benevolent dictator there. So my grandpa and father have passed, and so I'm there now, and my son's there too. But we're a pharmacy in Grand Rapids, Michigan, fairly big city, and I've just always been very excited just to see what I could do to promote the pharmacy. So that's where a lot of my rumblings in the media started.
Yes, I love how you call them little rumblings, because it's more than just a little rumbling here and there. Mike has been on air for more than 100 times. We were talking about this prior to coming live.
I'd say so over the years, right?
Yeah, so what we want to do today is walk people through. We're giving all of the independent pharmacists out there a roadmap as to why utilizing the media to showcase your expertise is so important, especially nowadays. And then I would love to hear your experience as to why you think that there is that the media has helped you and your pharmacy build your own brand, and not just for the pharmacy, but for the podcast too.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start off with this. Tell people the very first time you had your first media experience.
My dad was always in the media a lot during high school. He was a pretty good football player and so on. And I always thought that was cool. I would look at his yearbooks and things like that. And I said, well, I sure as heck ain't going to get in there because I don't have those skills. So I don't know. I always thought it was pretty cool, and I thought it was pretty cool to tell the story of. And also, I think sometimes, what's the movie? It's a Wonderful Life, where the main character, I forget his name. He thinks life is small, and he thinks he's just in his dad's old savings and loan, And so I always wanted to sort of make a bigger impression. Maybe it was for my own ego, just to make a bigger impression of saying, I'm not just a little corner pharmacy. I'm like the pharmacy in this media area.
Why is it important to have thought leadership skills as an independent pharmacy owner?
Well, I think that it gives trust to your pharmacy. I think that there's a lot of things that we do to build up trust in the pharmacy. One, for example, is on a negative side. For example, we don't have toys and Budweiser and different stuff there. So when people walk in, they're not seeing all this. And what we have had in the past has been like hospital beds and different things like this. Now, someone may walk in and say, I'm never going to need a hospital bed, but it gives the image of who you are. And it's like, if you can sell hospital beds and do this, well, then surely I can talk to you about my medicine. And I think being a thought leader does the same thing in town. By being the thought leader and being the one that's in the lead with the news and the information on drugs, that people will say, well, surely Mike can take care of my prescription, because that doesn't take necessarily thought leadership. So I think it puts you out in the lead, and it builds that trust because people say, I don't need all that, but I trust he could do it if I did need it.
Yeah. Yeah. It increases your brand awareness. It increases your credibility, increases your trustworthiness. And these are all important factors when you consider a pharmacist as part of the key players at what I visualize for my audience here every week. I keep saying pharmacists need to be at the healthcare table with mom and dad seated in the center, and then all of their healthcare providers around the table with them. And we always talk about having a seat at the table. And I think that this is a way to change the image of pharmacists so that they are viewed for what you guys should be viewed for after going to school for so many years, and to have your knowledge be on a pedestal of sorts instead of just thinking, I'm going to the pharmacy to fill a script. Right? Do you feel like that has given you a different opportunity?
Yeah, that's right. And really what we have as pharmacists, if you think, we don't really have a visual for a pharmacist. You know, doctors have stethoscopes and every other profession seems to have their visual. And what pharmacists have, we don't really have a visual. So my visual has been, I think, what I can kind of hang my hat on is being that thought leader, because my visual is really my knowledge, one. Number two, how I can share that knowledge with people. That's really what I do. I have knowledge, I share it with people, and I solve problems. And really, what better way to do that than to be on the news? Because I'm not on the news talking about weather or something. I'm talking about usually a current issue, solving a problem within a minute or two, and then wrapping it up. And that's really what I do for my job.
So I have to ask, were you shaking in your pants the first time a television?
Oh, that's right. You asked about the first time again, Michelle. I'm sorry. See, I got that gift of baloney that can just spew out of my mouth, and I can twist the story like that.
No, but it's good because I do want to give people the reason why this is so important. And I think we did that, right, with increasing your brand awareness and stuff. Yeah,
but I'm sorry, I missed your first question.
No, it's all good. I think that the reason why I'm asking it is because a lot of people I speak to, especially when it comes to independent pharmacists, they're like, I'm not going there. Don't even talk to me about being part of a television newscast. It's not happening, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to dig into that very first experience so that you could share your emotion.
Back in the day, with me being an old guy, that was usually more newspaper. And so I think I got my first starts by talking to reporters, but knowing it wasn't going to be live, that it was going to be in the newspaper. And so always a little bit worried about what gets misquoted. But I think that's what started things in. And then I think through the years, there's been a lot less, as you and I talked before, Michelle, there was a lot less live stuff back in the day. So you knew that if you screwed up something, you could do something like put your hand up in front of your face or do something like, say, cut, if you didn't want that on there. So it wasn't until like right now or like in the last 10 years where there's been a little bit of more live stuff. And it can shake you a little bit, but you just smile. We learned that from all the presidents, just smile, and that's what people remember. But no, people aren't trying to be critical of you. You're not trying to be critical of people when you watch them, and they're not trying to be critical of you.
I think that what's scary for some pharmacists is the idea that every single word I communicate has to be perfect and my message has to be 100% accurate, because that's the world that you live in.
Right.
And in having that be I don't want to say the shadow, but having that tone as a part going into the interview, that would make me anxious too. Especially when the media person wants it in 10 seconds or less. Here's the trick.
I've gotten a lot of compliments from people who will come in to the store after I've been on something, and they'll say, Mike, you did a great job, and it's so wonderful that you talk at our level.
Mm-hmm.
The secret is that's the only level I have.
I love it.
No, but I can't ramp it up. And I mean, I can't, I'm joking, but I don't try to ramp it up. I try to, sometimes I'll even start like with a big long word that I know I can't even pronounce, but I'll stop myself on purpose to say, let me put it how you little people can understand. No, but the moral of the story is I don't try to get into anything that's too technical. I mean, I truly am talking at the level. What they say, the newspaper is written for fourth graders or something like that. I used to hear that years ago, and we all know with our current president, he certainly has he talks, whether it's on purpose or not, but talks to a less. With not such big
I'm
words
waiting
so
to hear how you get through this next sentence.
He picks his audience. He picks his audience to have the most people be able to hear it and understand it. And so that's what I do on the news too.
Right. So we always talk about being clear, concise, and conversational. And I think the part that we're trying to hone in on right now is to really have conversational language instead of talking about naming the different medications that are on hand. Instead, you're going to talk to the audience for the audience that it's intended to. So if it is a newscast, you're right. We want to make it as simple as possible just because for the sheer fact that people are half listening. And the easier you create your message to be that clear, concise, and conversational, the more takeaway there is from it. There's more value from your interview.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So talk to me about the first TV appearance that you had. Was it inside your pharmacy and what the story was about?
Yeah. Back in the day, I would always have it inside of the pharmacy, and I don't do that anymore for a couple different reasons. I rarely have them inside of the pharmacy, but back then I did. And being the owner of the pharmacy, that was hard because you had customers you couldn't get on camera because of privacy reasons, even before HIPAA, and you had employees that didn't want to be on, and you were trying to talk, and you had people looking at you and so on. So that was pretty, it was kind of nerve-wracking. But I think early on, somehow I learned early on that the news, as you just said, Michelle, the news is just going to take some very small parts, just power words of things. And so it's only using, and this would not be for live segments, but it's only using like 10% of what you said. So you can pretty much, if you tell yourself that, if you say that, all right, let's say there's a 50% chance of making a mistake or something. Well, the news isn't going to show that anyways. They don't want you to look bad. They want you to look good. So I guess I would say that pretty much everybody is on your side. And so the first time, it goes quick. The first time would have been they came in, it's maybe a 10 or 15 minute setup, and then they tell you a couple things to do. They ask you some questions, but the thing is too is I wanted that attention, and so for me, even though I was a little bit nervous, I wanted it. And I guess if somebody didn't want it, there might be better options than being on the news for someone who doesn't want it. You have to have a little bit of that desire. And I think a lot of people have that desire. I'm not saying it's rare. I just think you have to kind of want to be on.
Right. I mean, I think it depends on the value you put on that thought leadership role and how it increases your bottom line at the end of the day. But my question about the first time, did the reporter find you? Or did you find the reporter?
No, I was part of I was in the neighborhood association. I was the vice president of that, and the president would get crazy press He was really good at it. I'm not sure where he picked it up from. And so between that and wanting to just be on the news and knowing it was good for the pharmacy and so on, I simply started a database of all the different news reporters in town. And so let's say we had 4 stations, and you probably knew at the time 4 or 5 personalities per station. And then let's say you knew 5 or 6 radio people. So I maybe had like 50 people that I would get postcards printed up, and I would just say, hey, I'm available to talk. And I would send those out about once a month or so. And I'd put, it was the first when the Avery labels came out, you'd run it through the printer and you could put them on there. So I'd send postcards out, and I still do that to this day. I'm doing that on my LinkedIn. I'm at least once a year, I'm going through all the different stations in town, plugging in what station they're at, looking up anybody that might be someone who I could be of interest to, maybe not the weather people or sports or sales and things like that, but anybody else I could be of interest to. And I just say, hey, I'm available. So I definitely had a purpose, a goal, and I knew how to do it from my mentor in the neighborhood association. And it was successful right away. I mean, news people have a lot of time to fill up. And so it was very successful.
I'm so glad that you mentioned how successful it was for you, because that is a great strategy. If you're listening to this, whether you're an independent pharmacist or in a totally different industry, what Mike just said was absolutely key. You took on your own PR role. Everybody spends so much money on these public relations specialists, and I love them too. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
They're doing the best they can to pitch your story to the media, but you, as the customer, you don't really know what they're sending to us, me being the media. And now by cutting that middle person out, you're not only helping yourself knowing the content that you're pushing forward, the brand that you're pushing forward, but you're cutting out the middleman on the news side too. Because here's why independent pharmacists and anybody who owns their own business is the golden nugget, right? The golden character in all of these news stories is because as the media personnel, you have to fill so much time, as you just said.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's just the cycle is 24 hours a day, as we all know. But we would have to jump through hoops to get to your public relations department if you're a part of a chain. And guess what the public relations department is going to do? They're not going to get on camera with us. If I'm a reporter in Grand Rapids, Michigan, do you think that somebody from the head of CBS is going to pop up on camera with me in Grand Rapids in person? Not happening. Yeah. Especially not happening in a day or in a couple of hours. So what I would get as the media personnel is a quote that I would have to then turn into a beautiful graphic that someone would see on the news that night. And that doesn't help my story. We're a visual medium. We live in visual times. That's not going to work. So that's why I have always, always, always been a cheerleader for independent pharmacists and for business owners, entrepreneurs, to take the bull by the horns, because this is free and it's accessible. If you have time to put together that database that you just said, then you are saving your company thousands upon $1,000 a month, and you're staying in control of your message.
Yeah, and I think one thing, Michelle, I have trouble remembering, what I did yesterday, but as I think back now, like 30 years, I remember reading a lot of books, and the books would always tell me how to do a public relations release, and they'd say, have your this, and then do this and that, and then have your 3, number signs at the bottom to show that it's done and all this stuff. And I would start with that. And so as I think back to my first days, which you were asking about, I would start with press releases, like, we're no longer carrying tobacco at the pharmacy, and this is our 25th year of this, or our 50th year of this, and so on. But after a while, somehow that morphed to saying, like my cards would say, I will talk to you about anything, basically. It says, I will talk to you about anything. And so no longer was because most of the books you read, they'll tell you to pitch stuff to the news. And I never pitch anything to the news too much anymore. To some of my radio guys, I'll send them a headline once in a while, like, hey, this is pretty cool. But I'll never pitch something. I'm pitching myself. I'm pitching my cell phone, my availability, that I'll get back to them in 20 minutes if they, email me something, that I'll come down to the station, that I'm going to give you a pretty good interview. I might say some dumb things, but on the whole, I might come up with some better things. But that's what I'm giving people. I'm giving them a solution, not a story necessarily.
You are a gold mine. I love all the tidbits that you are just throwing out as your experience during this interview. Let's dig in there a little bit. And let's talk about why your approach changed in comparison to how technology has changed. So back in the days, public releases used to be the in thing, right? Now, if you talk to me for more than 5 minutes, you'll know that I hate PR. I mean, not public relations as a whole, but press releases for the media. For me as a reporter, it slows me down. It's too long. There are pages upon pages.
Yeah.
And I like to do my own research. And what I really want to know is the answers to the questions you put on that postcard. Are you going to call me back? Are you available? And can I get you on camera? And are you going to be afraid to talk on camera? Those are the things that I would be thinking about. And the immediacy is so important. And I'm so glad that you addressed that first.
I think here's what it was. I think 20 years ago, and I'm no news person, but in my imagination back then, let's say 30 years ago, they would see stuff on maybe the evening news. They wouldn't have maybe a lot of drug stuff about drugstores and about health and so on. So back then, maybe I did a service by writing to them and saying, hey, here's some news about pharmacy. Mm-hmm. In my opinion now, you newsy people, you guys are just like, this stuff is bombarding you. It's coming at you heavy, heavy, heavy. Being local news, this has always been my guess, that you have to put, or you're not just retelling that story, or else you're a national news program. The twist that you have to put on it is take national news and put on a local spin to it. And so I'm the local spinner. I'm not giving you guys information. There's nothing that I'm telling the news locally that they couldn't get just from reading an article. The only thing I'm giving the news is I'm giving them to say, oh, here's a guy, even if not actually saying it this way, there's like the visual is like, here's a guy from Grand Rapids. He's live. He's local. It was fast. This news only came out a half hour ago, and he's here doing it. And so it lets the news people do the local twist that they need. And I'm that resource.
And I think the reason why your approach is so important, that it did switch from that press release to, hey, this is me and I'm here, is because the way that we consume news has totally changed. So the advent of talking heads, as we call them, as a part of our news segments. So when did that start? That started when cable news came about, 2000. It really infiltrated local news, where you'll be live inside of a studio or during a satellite interview, probably about 2010, depending on the market that you're in. New York is going to be different from Orlando, Florida. So I think that because we moved from, hey, we don't want to just hear from Mike during a segment about flu shots that now you could get at your pharmacy. We want to hear from Mike about the changes in the healthcare marketplace. We want to talk to Mike about how drug supply is impacted by COVID-19. We want to hear from Mike because he has expertise in the subject. And that twist changed your strategy. And so kudos to you for recognizing that. And that's why you're so successful. That's why you have hundreds of media interviews behind you already. So that really is amazing that you were able to see that switch and go with what's happening in the marketplace.
See, my goal is that I am the stamp. Well, this is what I pretend. This is what I want to think to myself, that I am the stamp of Grand Rapids medical and pharmacy news. And if there's a story about pharmacy, and if someone doesn't see me on it, if a viewer is watching it and they don't see me on it, in my imagination, they're saying, well, that wasn't a complete story.
I love
We didn't hear from Mike. They didn't get Mike on there. And so, it'd be like, it'd be like watching Johnny Carson or back in the day, and you turn it on and all of a sudden, it would be, some other comedian on there taking his place. It's like, that's not the Johnny Carson show. I want to watch him. I don't want a guest host. And so I am I want to be the name brand stamp of pharmacy and medical news coming out of Grand Rapids.
So I think that is amazing that you're able to articulate your vision in such a clear, concise, and conversational way, Mike. Let's get back to the COVID-19 slant on all of this right now and why independent pharmacists, we already talked about how it could improve business in your pharmacy, how it is not by any means a direct link, but by having that thought leadership role, it increases your brand awareness, your trust and credibility in the marketplace. Okay, so we established that. We also established how you could go about contacting the news when you were talking about your database. Now let's talk to the independent pharmacists out there who are saying, okay, this Mike thing, this sounds good. This is really cool. I want to be Mike 2.0. What do you say to those independent pharmacists to take advantage? Let's delete that word advantage. I'm going to edit myself right now. But to put your expertise out into the marketplace because the media needs to hear from you. What would you say is step number one?
All right. So here's the process. And now I'm going to say, first I want to say there's never a bad time to enter this. So if you have done it, great, because I get calls, few calls saying, Mike, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because of all the work I did, they know I'm available. Okay. But let's say you've done none of it. The first step is to get on LinkedIn today. And there's going to be probably 30 people that you can get that are reporters, newspaper reporters from your local area. Find those people, look them up by the name of the company, Wood TV or whatever. Find them. You're going to want to connect with them, but send a personal connection. And you're going to say, Steve, we haven't met, but I run a pharmacy here for the last 10 years. I'd be happy to talk on COVID if you would like to. You can reach me on LinkedIn. I get the messages immediately, or you can call me on my cell phone. I carry it all the time, and I look forward to hearing from you. So every pharmacist should get on LinkedIn and do that over the next hour. Reach out to 30 people with your phone number. Tell them that you carry your phone with you. You'll respond right away, and that's it.
So I'm going to add to that. That is a great action step, and you know how much I love my action steps. I'm going to add to that by saying when you send that message, what would be a great bullet point in the body of that message would be one trend that you're seeing, that you have information on, that you could be the voice of. So maybe, for instance, that is, hey, a lot of customers of mine are coming into the pharmacy and they're scared that they're not going to be able to get their diabetic medication because of COVID-19. We have a plan for that. If you want to talk to me about that more, you don't even have to go into details about your expertise on the topic. But what that does on the media side is that it plants a seed, because now if I get that email, I'm going to do a little Google search. I'm going to start researching. Is this a valid story? And then I'm going to go to you to get the rest of the story.
Yeah, you're connecting the dots ahead of time for the news person, which makes their job even easier.
Right. Right. And trust me when I tell you that anything that you could do, I think, of course, all industries, anything you can do to make our job easier is going to be A-okay. All right, Mike, tell people how they could reach you and tell us a little bit more about this podcast.
The best way, they can go on and just look up the businessoffpharmacypodcast.com, or the shorthand is just bizoffpharmpod.com. There's a lot of ways to look it up. We're on 12 of the apps, YouTube station, and so on. So just look it up, and it's just my goal is to make it entertaining and interesting, and that's my two things I want out of it.
I would even say, Mike, it is so interesting that you could listen to it. Listen, I'm not a part of the pharmacy world.
Exactly.
I always say that I'm an outsider looking in, peering into your world through this little window. Yes. And your podcast is a great way to pull some business strategies out of it. So my point is that if you're not a pharmacist, it's still a great listen to learn just about different business models.
That's been my goal for people, knowing that usually there's not four pharmacists in a car at one point. There's a pharmacist and a wife and a couple of the friends or whatever. It's to make it interesting enough that you can listen in. It's themed on pharmacy, but everybody can find it interesting and entertaining.
And on that note, I would love to just give you a big air hug 6 feet away.
Oh,
yes. To say thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all your thoughts. And I hope that we just got people's wheels turning a little bit about how they could use media and how they could contact media all for free to increase their brand awareness and increase their credibility.
Yeah, and thanks for everything you do to help pharmacists, Michelle, in the media realm. It's appreciated.
I could talk about this forever. Sometimes I get heated. I get excited about all these different ideas. If anybody is watching that would like to contact me as well, you could hop onto my website, michelleburdo.com, MICHELLEBURDO. Set up a 30-minute free consult. I always love digging in with people, so I could even help you write that initial email for free, so you could start and get the ball rolling, so you could have some media relations propped up on your site and for your pharmacy. Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Michelle.
All right, I'll see you guys all next week. Have a good week and enjoy your family time. Bye, everybody.